Hello. Today we're going to review the second chapter of Telushkin's Jewish literacy series. We're using his book Jewish Literacy, and I'm reading from page 6 on the subject Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden. The Torah opening chapter describes God's creation of the world. Genesis' goal is not to give a textbook lesson in science, but to affirm that nature, which many people in the ancient world worshipped as a deity, was created by God. In general, the biblical view of creation is optimistic. Repeatedly, the Torah notes concerning God's creation, and God saw that it was good. 1:10, 12, 18, 21, and 31. On the sixth day of creation, God creates the first person, Adam, whose name becomes the Hebrew word for human being. As John Milton noted, the first thing God ever specified as being not good is Adam's solitude. It is not good for man to be alone. He says, I will make a helpmate for him. 2:18. God put Adam into the deep sleep and takes a rib. Actually, the Hebrew text is not really clear what it was from his body, and fashioned from it the first woman, Eve. The very first of the Torah's 613 commandments addressed to the couple. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and master it. 128. Adam and Eve would reside in paradise, in a land known as the Garden of Eden. God provides all their needs, imposing but one prohibition on the couple. They are not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The shrewd and strangely talkative serpent tells Eve that if she eats from the tree, she will be as knowledgeable as God himself. God knows that as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. Genesis 3:5. After slight hesitation, Eve eats of the tree's fruit. There is no reason, by the way, to suppose that the fruit she eats is an apple, and then persuade Adam to eat from it as well. God is displeased. There was only one command he asked the couples to keep, only one thing in the universe denied to them, yet they were disobedient. His punishment is severe. Adam and Eve are exiled from Eden. They are fated to die, and God will no longer supply their needs. Adam must now earn his living from the sweat of his brow, while Eve is to be subject to her husband's domination and will bring forth children in pain. While traditional Jewish commentary condemned Eve's sin, the late Jewish educator Shmuel Barden offered a brilliant parable to explain her act of disobedience. Imagine, Barden taught, that a young woman marries a young man whose father is president of a large company. After the marriage, the father makes the son vice president and gives him a large salary. But because he has no work experience, the father gives him no responsibility. Every week, the young man draws a large check, but he has nothing to do. His wife soon realizes that she is not married to a man, but to a boy, and that as long as her husband stays in his father's firm, he will always be a boy. So she forces him to quit his job, give up his security, go to another city, and start out on his own. That, Barton concluded, is the reason Eve ate from the tree. In Christian theology, this story of disobedience became the original sin with which all mankind was permanently stained. But Jews have never regarded it with this same seriousness. It was an act of defiance, to be sure, because it transgressed God's command. It was a sin, but the idea that every child born is damned for that sin is alien to Jewish thought. Despite the harsh sentence, Adam lives more than 900 years, and he and Eve's descendants eventually populate the entire world. Genesis' assertion that all mankind descend from this one couple is the basis for the biblical view that human beings of all races and religions our brothers and sisters. You know, one of the interesting things that I learned and came to understand also about Adam and Eve in the situation in the Garden of Eden was that I never really took the viewpoint of sin, even though I might have taken the viewpoint of disobedience. For example, you have two children, and the two children are young. They're innocent in the world, and they really, 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 although they've been told not to touch a particular thing, they're not actually told what it is they're not touching it for, as opposed to why. Now, children are very, very curious by nature, and I would assume that Adam and Eve, even though they might have been created in an adult form, might have still been infantile in their way of reasoning within the world. And this is why a serpent, who has probably been around on the scene, if you remember the order of creation, the serpent had been on the scene for a much longer period of time than Adam and Eve, and therefore a little bit more shrewd in his reasoning. So he said, you will not surely die, because see, really, Adam and Eve didn't really have a concept of what death was either. See, because prior to Adam and Eve, there was no concept of life and death, and so Adam and Eve really didn't know what was going on. You will not surely die, however, you will become wise like God. Now, for a child to hear, you will become like your father, what might have been a very, very tempting prospect. Because the scripture goes on to say that she looked on the fruit and she saw that it was appealing, and she saw that it was tasty. But the thing that really got her attention was that it was desirable to make one wise. If I found the shortcut to the wisdom of my father, would I not at least be tempted to try that? Well, that's what human choice is all about. Human choice is all about taking a risk sometime for the effort of achieving something that you perceive in whatever state you're in as a higher idea. I will become wise like my father. So we read the chapter of Joseph Telushkin's Jewish Literacy, and you can pick it up at a bookstore, or you can order it online. I'm not a salesman for the book. I just want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. And as we continue this discussion, we'll begin to see how early Jewish Hebrew behavior began to play out, and how Jewish lifestyles and tradition evolved over the years as it is described by Joseph Telushkin. Until then, have a good afternoon and farewell.